I was just so far into this group without even realizing it and without even realizing that it was happening. I was so far into this clique that I'm so ashamed that I just didn't speak up, or I look back and I'm so embarrassed at the person that I was. Hello everybody, my name is Dingle and this is the story of how I lost all of my friends. So I made a video the other week, probably other month, about how I wanted to start opening up on the internet about stories that I have to offer that make me who I am today and that taught me life lessons, because I get questions all the time about school or bullies or anxiety or stress, etc. And I have a lot, I feel like, to offer from stories or personal experiences that I've gone through myself or I'm still going through. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure to check it out. But during that video, I did request that you all put in the comments topics that you would like me to touch on, and if I have any advice or personal experiences having to do with those topics. So I say that I made that video a few months ago because it turns out that opening up on the internet is much harder than just saying it. Not that I was just saying it, it's just more like I'm ready for sure. But when I actually went to organize my thoughts around experiences that I wanted to share, it's actually so much harder than just telling a story or telling you, like, you have to be really vulnerable, and I'm super excited to start doing that with you guys, because the thought that this might help people going through or having gone through the same thing is super worth it for me. So I really hope that this series helps anybody out there, so let me know. Also, just a quick interjection, if this is the first time you are seeing my face, I am Dingle. It's so nice to meet you. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you're into videos such as these, or if you want to see me talk on any other subjects in this opening up on the internet series that I'm doing. Okay, let's get into it. So one of the common requests that I got on that video had to do with friendships, high school, middle school, fake friendships, bullies, etc. And so I thought that that would be a really great first video of the series to touch on for that. And the questions particularly had to do with if I've ever experienced something like this, any advice that I would give, anything I've learned from my experiences. And the short answer is yes, I do have experiences. I lost all of my friends in high school, and this is that story. I learned so much from it. I went through so much because of it, and I'm actually really excited to tell you the whole story, nothing holding back except for names, because I can't imagine what other people might be learning from this, or like what they're feeling if they're going through this right now. So that's the short answer, yes, but please stay tuned for the longer answer. Grab a snack, grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, whatever you fancy, and let's just get right into it. So there was this big group of friends in high school, and I was mutual friends with some of the people within this group, but they would get together on the weekends, they'd hang out, they would do fun things together, but I never was really like in it. I was just kind of mutually friends with some of the people through sports and stuff like that. And I would say I was mutually friends across like sophomore year and junior year, and then because I was mutually friends with people, I naturally started hanging out with them more towards the end of junior year, far more beginning of senior year and onward throughout senior year. And this group of people was so fun. Like, they would go to things and do activities such as like homecoming or school dances or Friday night football games, and I just never really got into that stuff in high school. So when I started naturally hanging out with these people more, like end of junior year into senior year, it was so fun and it was so new for me, and I have really great memories still, like looking back on that. My last year of high school was so great because like this overall group of people. Something that was also new for me though, when we would go to homecoming or when we would go to school dances or football games and stuff, the girls would get ready together and then the boys would like come over and hang out with us or take pictures or whatever, and there were only like maybe one or two people dating within that group, so it was just basically a really big massive friend group. That's how I would describe it. But what was new for me is having kind of like girls getting together and getting ready and doing makeup and hair and dresses and stuff like that. It was just, I grew up with brothers and I never really had a big group of girlfriends, so it was new for me, but it was really exciting. I just remember being like, wow, look what I found, this is so crazy. But then from from getting ready at the beginning of the events where like all the friend group would come together eventually, I all of a sudden started getting invited to everything with the girls. You know, they would go to plays and we'd get dressed up and we'd go to plays in town, or we would just hang out in each other's basements like during the weekend and just have like a blast, but it was like only girls nights. But I started finding myself invited to everything. I was on group texts, I was, you know, in on the gossip, I guess, of the group, or like who liked who, and that was really new. But yeah, I just found myself starting to be invited to everything, and they would say things like, oh my gosh, we're such great friends, we're best friends, and like all this stuff. And again, it was so new for me, so I was just like, yeah, this is so crazy, like wow, I found these like really special group of people. How did this happen? But okay, we're gonna go along with it. However, in retrospect, when I look back on it and talk about it today, I was all of a sudden in a clique and I didn't even know it. And just like any clique, there was, again, this is me speaking in retrospect, when I was in it, I had no idea, but there was a queen bee, and it was super stereotypical. You know, you didn't want to make the queen bee mad because she had a grasp on everyone in the group, and she was the one that ultimately decided like what we would do or who we would hang out with, or because if you went against her, you were always afraid that she was going to talk about you, because that's what would happen. If someone in the group made her mad, then she was backstabbing them and like talking about them, like, oh, did you hear what this person said or whatever? And because you didn't want to, it's so messed up, but like because you didn't want to be that person, you just kind of went along with it. So it was constantly like, yeah, wow, that's so dramatic, or like, yeah, that's crazy that she did that and stuff. Oh, you must be so hurt. Like people would just go along with it because they didn't want to be that victim themselves, if that makes sense. And there was also, like I mentioned, there was this group chat where we would talk about when we were hanging out next, or who we were inviting to hang out next before we go to this school dance, or you know, who not to invite before, like for getting ready for the school dance. So it was secret so that like no one else knew like our like internal best friend plans type of thing. And I'll always remember it, she crosses my mind all the time. There was this girl specifically that from the beginning, and I had no idea the dynamics or anything like that, but all of a sudden when I was being invited to everything, like this girl's name would be dropped all the time about, oh, she's so dramatic and she always is trying to hang out with us, but like doesn't she understand that we're just super close and you can't force something like that? Like they would justify excluding this girl that really wanted to be on the inside, and it like makes me sick talking about it today, because that was so cruel. That was so cruel. But one of the telltale signs, and I'll tell anyone this, one of the telltale signs of someone that is a queen bee or a bully, or you know, like excluding people, they'll call other people dramatic when they simply just had a small question or wanted to be invited to something, or were sad that they weren't invited to something. Like, God forbid this person was like, wow, when was this? I really wanted to be there. They'd be like, oh my gosh, they're so dramatic, they're so dramatic. And it's like, no, that is not wanting to be included on something that looks fun or you feel like you're being excluded on does not make you dramatic. I was just so far into this group without even realizing it, and without even realizing that it was happening. I was so far into this clique that I'm so ashamed that I just didn't speak up, or I look back and I'm so embarrassed at the person that I was or turned into for this period of time, because I honestly look back, I don't know who that person was. I don't want to know that person ever. It was also clear, this was also a sign, like it was also clear that the group itself, the girl group itself, didn't like boyfriends. Like they would talk about boys all the time, and they, you know, this boy's cute and that boy's cute, etc., but they wouldn't ever be supportive of girls who had boyfriends, were in the larger group. And like when I think back on it, the girl that they were always looking to exclude or not include in things had a long-term boyfriend, and she was one of the only girls in the broader group that had a boyfriend. And they were constantly saying, you know, how much time they spend together and how she should spend more time with girlfriends, and girl time is really valuable and you should really value your girlfriends, but I guess we're not that important. And it's like, no, you're not even including her on things. You can't even give her a chance. Like, plus if you have a boyfriend, that's your boyfriend. Sorry, he does come first. Like, you know, especially if you're taking the relationship really seriously, like that's your significant other. Make time for friends, but if you don't feel like making time for friends, then good, like don't, you know, do you. But like they were so protective of their girl time, like, and if boys, you know, if it wasn't a huge group hangout and a boy was there when the girls were hanging out, like you could tell everyone was like either texting behind your back or, you know, like, oh, why is he here? Like, oh my god, I can't believe she brought him. Like, it was just a weird vibe with the whole boyfriend thing. So again, this is senior year, so from fall to spring this kind of continued. I was super in it. I was included on all of the chats. I was included in all of the hangouts. I was so happy. I remember that as a really happy time. I wasn't stressed about being part of the group. Like, I just was. Like, there was never any question for me, I guess, if I was part of it or not, because they'd made me feel so welcome and I was included on everything. Then I met Jack at prom and we started talking some more and hanging out, and then we eventually officially started dating during May of 2010, which was senior year May, like about to graduate type of thing. And at first the girls were super supportive. They were like commenting on my Facebook photos and they were like, oh my god, you guys are so cute. And you know, in person they would be like, oh, you guys are perfect together, etc. So I was like, sweet, everything's going well. But then all of a sudden I started getting invited to less and less things. But looking back on it, it was definitely two-sided. Like, Jack and I were dating, high school sweetheart, summer romance type of thing. We were super into each other. We were hanging out all the time. So it's not like I was trying to hang out with the girls all the time and they just weren't including me. It's just, you know, they just started inviting me to less and less things. But I just knew in the back of my mind, like I was so happy with Jack that like it didn't cloud it or anything, but I just knew in the back of my mind how those girls operate. So that was definitely going through my head a little bit for sure. Just because I knew what they were probably saying about the relationship behind closed doors, like behind the Facebook comments and behind the artificially comments they would say in person, you know? Because I've seen them do it to other people, for sure. In fact, there was this annual trip that the girls took. They took an annual girls trip to one of the girls' Cape houses. Her family owned a house on the Cape, and I'd been invited months before, like when I was like super in and like, you know, they were like all excited that I was hanging out with them and stuff like that. So, but it's actually one of those trips that the girl I was mentioning that they didn't include on things or excluded her, it was actually that trip that like she always wanted to be invited on, and she was super hurt that she wasn't invited. And I never saw it like that because the group mentality was that she was dramatic and I don't understand why she thinks that she would be invited. There's not enough room in the car. It's just it's a numbers thing. It's a, you know, like we just can't invite everyone, and it's like, but you know. But that summer I was invited and I was really excited. I went on the trip, but the whole time like there were just backhanded comments. They never like sat me down and talked to me about it. It was just like, oh, you know, girl time is so important and I'm so glad we have this like time together. Or, you know, there were comments about going into college because that year we would be going into college. This was like the summer before college. There were all these comments about you shouldn't go into college in a relationship and you shouldn't keep your options open and you don't want to be tied down and you don't want to be distracted and things like that. And all I remember is just counting down the days until Jack would come to pick me up from the Cape so that we could just continue to spend our summer together. But fast forward, we went to college. People went kind of their separate ways, but then on breaks, of course, like we would be like seeing each other. Everyone would be texting each other kind of during school, kind of. Again, I was really distracted with Jack in a good way. Like we were long distance, we were in love, and clearly that worked out. So yeah, it was all good and fine, I would say. In my head at that point, it was all good and fine. But we were coming to the end of freshman year and I did start noticing that I was on less and less texts. I was not being invited to things, like I wasn't hearing about anything happening when people got home for the summer, which I know there would be stuff going on, like they would all want to get together and bond and do all these things and stuff, and it was just like, to say that I started freaking out and having extreme anxiety about the whole friend group situation and how like I wasn't on texts that I knew were probably going on. I wasn't on Facebook invites that I knew might be private from me. That's an understatement. I was a wreck. Because I know how these girls operate at this point, and I just knew how quick they were to exclude people. I remember feeling like my world was about to collapse around me just thinking about it, because honestly, these were my only, it felt like my only friends at home, and so they were my world. You know, imagine if you think that, you know, you have a group of 5 girls or 6 girls or 7 girls, and all of a sudden you think about that all going away and you're alone. Like, that was so scary to me as a freshman in college coming back for a summer. To think that my friends are starting to phase me out was so scary, because it felt like I had once been a part of something that was so fun and so supportive, and I'd finally found like this group of best friends, and they would throw the word love around like confetti, like, oh my god, I love you, or oh, we're gonna be best friends forever, we're gonna, you know, like eventually live on the same street, and our kids are gonna grow up together. Like, that's the kind of talk they would do, like when we were all together and I was over their house, or when we were getting ready for things and stuff. Like, it was so toxic. To think that that was about to get ripped away, or to feel like it was getting ripped away from me, it made me feel so silly, because like I don't take the word love lightly at all. So it was so silly for me to think that they actually cared about me, I guess. Like, after seeing how they treated other people, I felt so silly to think they would treat me any different, I guess. So that summer, the summer when I got back from freshman year, I started working so hard, and I started focusing so hard on being invited to things and making sure I made plans to, you know, have things over at my house, so at least I knew that I would be included in them. Or, you know, we'd be hanging out and they'd be like the hangout would kind of come to an end-ish, and I'd be like, oh, what are you guys doing? And they'd be like, oh, we're gonna go. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I would just kind of make myself naturally go along with them and stuff. Just like the amount of thought and stress that I put on this group to make sure that I was included was enormous. And I honestly, again, I just don't recognize who that girl was. I lost every part of myself. Jack, all of a sudden, who was my number one, all of a sudden became second to these girls in my life. And Jack loved me, and these girls cared nothing about me. He did not deserve that at all. And the things that cliques will do to somebody mentally is astonishing. It's crazy to look back on, for sure. But that summer, I remember I was still invited to the Cape. I think they had invited me a few months previous to it, or they like mentioned it in a chat or something, like a casual thing. And so I knew that I was invited, and I remember that lifting so much stress off my chest, because I knew every summer they'd go to the Cape. So if I didn't hear about it, that probably means that they didn't invite me. And the thought of not being invited to that is crazy stressful. But yeah, so they invited me. But I remember literally leaving a family vacation that we were having in Maine, and Jack was part of that too. I left my family and Jack during our family vacation to go drive down to be part of this Cape week with these girls that cared nothing about me. That's how much I didn't want to be pushed out, I guess. And the trip honestly was super stressful anyway, because the whole time I was focused on making sure I was a lot of fun, and making sure that I was in on all the inside jokes, and making sure that, you know, like I was doing everything I could that they'd want to hang out with me and invite me to more things from that point forward. And it was just classic clique stuff. The conversations, we dressed up in like jeans and white tops to take like best friend pictures on the beach, and we even like went as far as talking about we even went as far as talking about how we were going to keep Facebook albums private from people who we knew were going to be super mad if they saw these photos on Facebook, you know, and they weren't invited to the Cape. But honestly, in reality, it's not that they would be mad at seeing these photos. They'd be extremely hurt by seeing these photos. And these girls were just more about, oh, we don't want anyone to cause drama because they weren't invited on this trip. So we literally would talk about how we would make these albums visible to these, and these people, but not these, and these people. So summer went on, and I remember it was coming to a close and everyone was getting ready to go back to sophomore year of college, and I knew that I was desperate to be included on any like last summer girl hurrah thing. So I invited all of them over to my house for a last summer slumber party before we went off to our separate schools. And I remember one of the girls showed up early just because she was available, and then the rest were working or something like that. So one of the girls came over, and I was so close with this girl. I remember we just clicked. Like we like laughed the most. We got each other's humor, and I just remember feeling so happy and at home with her. But yeah, so she was over and we were going on her laptop for something. She opens her laptop and the screensaver is all of the girls except for me. I like remember that feeling. It was all of the girls except for me posed in a location that I didn't recognize, and they all had Build-A-Bears, and they were like posing with Build-A-Bears together. I'll never forget that feeling. My heart skipped a beat, my stomach dropped. It was the worst feeling in the world. It was all of the things that you were afraid of and all of the things that you thought were going on but were hoping that maybe you were just crazy. It was all of those coming to life, and you realized that your gut was right. It turns out that photo was them hanging out in Boston all together. It was every single one of the girls in this clique except for me, hanging out in like Boston Commons with Build-A-Bears that they had just all got together that day. That's when everything kind of started coming together for me, because I can't make this up, I promise you. Like, recounting this, I couldn't believe this was true, but it 100% is. Just a few weeks previous to that, I was texting the queen bee of the group, and she was wondering, when are we going to Maine? Like, when is my family going to Maine? When I'm going to Maine? When I was gonna think of scheduling this slumber party for the last hurrah before we go off to college. And she literally was just getting dates of when I wouldn't be around or when I wouldn't know, just for the original group of girls to go to Boston and have just that together, just with them. She organized it for when I wasn't in town. But not only that, the reason why I had never seen these photos before, I saw it on my friend's desktop, was because they had taken these photos. They had a full-on photo shoot, just like the photo shoot that we had on the Cape as best friends on the beach. They had all gotten Build-A-Bears. They took photos in Boston Commons, and they had hid that album from me on Facebook, just like they had hid the album from the girls that didn't get to go on the Cape trip, that album. And I know that because when I was talking to my mom later about it, and I'll get to that in just a sec, when it all just came flooding down, my mom had told me that she saw these photos on Facebook. She didn't think twice of them because she thought, you know, either I knew about the trip, it was when we were away, I already knew that that was happening, I just wasn't around, and they were gonna go all hang out. But it turns out that they just didn't remember that they were friends with my mom on Facebook too. So my mom saw the photos, and again, she didn't think anything of it to mention it to me, but they forgot to block her from the albums as well. So at this point, sitting on the couch, seeing that picture on my friend's laptop, to say that I felt like life as I knew it was over for me is a vast understatement, because that was my life at that point. That's everything that I knew. Those are the friends that I knew that I thought loved me and cared about me and included me on everything. And you know, oh, they talked crap about these girls over here, but they would never do that to me. That's crazy. They said that they loved me. That's not true. If they do it to one person, what makes you think that they won't do it to you? That's silly to think that they couldn't do that to you as well. They had completely turned on me, just like they've turned on girls in the past. Now I was officially on the outside. I felt so ashamed, and I felt so stupid, and I felt so embarrassed. So to top it all off, again, we're at the sleepover. That is where we are at now. And I have to go through the entire night pretending that I'm not thinking anything about the photo that I saw on the laptop. So all of the girls come over, I put a smile on my face, even though deep down I knew that this was all over. So we were all hanging out and everybody was getting ready for bed, and and I remember the queen bee goes to grab her toothbrush from her bag, and she pulls out the Build-A-Bear. She had brought the Build-A-Bear to the sleepover, the Build-A-Bear that she thought that I knew nothing about. But she knew that everybody else in that room knew where that Build-A-Bear came from and what it signified and what it meant. Just a slight, subtle reminder to everybody in the room that I didn't belong. So I remember going back to college, like a few weeks later, maybe like 2 weeks later, a week later or something. It just all came crashing down. I could not focus, I could not function socially. I was such a tight ball of stress on the inside because I hadn't talked to anybody about this. And so I called my mom, who I tell everything to, like everything. And so the fact that I was keeping this from her, it just goes to show how ashamed I was and how embarrassed I was to be on the outside of something. I felt like a fool. I felt like it was my fault for not seeing the signs, and I felt embarrassed because to her, these were my best friends, and all of a sudden they weren't, and I was on the outside. That was so shameful for me. But again, I couldn't function. I didn't trust anybody. It was affecting my friendships in college, which that wasn't fair to them either. They were so great. 3 of my college friends were my bridesmaids in my wedding. They are true friends, and I was second guessing everyone. I was second guessing my trust between everyone, and I lost it. I broke down. But after talking it through with my mom and talking, I mean, like, it was a crazy week. I knew that I could not just back away and let it fizzle out and let them think that it didn't affect me in any way. So we crafted up some Facebook messages to send out to the girls just to let them know that I knew and how much it hurt me and how much it affected me and how much of that is not okay to treat a person. And there was back and forth conversation on the Facebook messages, nothing necessarily like, well, you this or that. It wasn't like that. It was just, there was a lot of defending, there was a lot of apologizing from some of the girls for sure. Queen Bee, no, like didn't see it at all. I shouldn't have expected her to see it like that anyway, because she honestly thought whatever she was doing was right, so we were just coming at it from completely different angles. But the back and forths kind of fizzled out after a bit. I was exhausted. I was not going to defend myself or converse about it anymore, so it kind of just fizzled out, but at least I knew that they knew how much it hurt me, and I know that it stuck with a few of the girls. I know it did. But the Queen Bee honestly started freaking out, and I know this only because literally over the next few weekends, she made road trips from her college to go personally visit the girls that were at college just to make sure that her talons were still in them, and you know, they still trusted her and loved her, and you know, she didn't lose any of her power. That's what it was. But this experience messed me up and tore me apart for years. I had trouble trusting friendships. I had trouble forming new friendships because of those trust issues. I would always think that people had ulterior motives, and I always would think, you know, this person's really nice to me, but what are they saying behind my back? What am I not being invited to? You know, if I sit at this point of the table, I won't be part of the conversations down there, and I might not get invited to the next thing. It was a lot. It affected me for a really long time. But I do remember the moment where it all stopped. It was our 5th year high school reunion, and Jack and I met up with a few of our really good, still good, close high school friends, the ones that just weren't involved in this whatsoever. And we met up at Smoky Bones to grab a drink and some food before heading over to the reunion itself. And I just remember weeks leading up to this reunion, days before, also just feeling sick to my stomach thinking about seeing this Queen Bee at the reunion. I hadn't seen her for 4 years, spoken to at all for 4 years at this point, and I remember being so afraid that seeing her would just bring it all back. I would feel small or weak or powerless or broken again. But when we got to the restaurant where the thing was being hosted, I remember walking in and there was a group of girls that, it wasn't like just those girls, but there was just a group that we usually hung out with, that they were kind of part of the bigger friend group that I had mentioned. And you know, we said hi and how is everyone, and everyone was laughing and giggling and, you know, just putting a smile on my face, doing my thing. And I remember getting to the Queen Bee and she was so visibly uncomfortable. uncomfortable. Like, she was so awkward. She was like not looking me in the eye at all. I was laughing, making conversations, small talk, etc. Like, I was just doing the best that I could, but she was so awkward and uncomfortable. It was so obvious. Throughout the night, I just remember talking to people that I had never bonded with in high school, and it was so refreshing. We were social butterflies that night. We were bouncing in between people. I was with my friend Megan from high school, who again was one of my bridesmaids actually in my wedding. We were bouncing from group to group and like reminiscing and, you know, bringing up new things and how everyone was doing. And I remember talking to the most awesome people when I thought that those were like the popular girls in high school, but in reality they are so sweet and so nice, and I never got to bond with those people in high school because I was so engrossed in this tiny little clique that I thought was my entire world. And here's the moment I was talking about. I remember looking over at some point in the night to the queen bee and all of her little minions, and I just remember thinking, wow, you haven't talked to anybody else this whole night. Like, she literally kept to herself and the little people that she knew, and that was it. She just kept to her own little tiny world. And I just remember thinking, wow, you are so small. Here I was thinking I'm afraid of her making me feel small, like she did, and insignificant and worthless, like she did years ago. But she was so small in her own tiny, small little world that she can manipulate, and that's where her borders reached. That was it. It was the most freeing feeling, and I have not looked back since. So if you are going through something like this currently, or if you have gone through it and you haven't had that moment of clarity yet, just know that, gosh, like, those girls, if they don't grow beyond how they are acting or how they are treating people or how they are behaving, they will never grow beyond themselves. But guess what? You will. You will be the one that grows beyond it. You will see amazing things. You will experience crazy great things in your life by escaping that. Like, I know it feels like your world is falling apart, but I promise you it is for the so much better. I promise you. And if you ever get the chance to treat them like they treated you, I hope you walk away, because I would be so proud of you. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It feels crazy to think back on that part of my life and recount all of the details, but it's okay. It's definitely freeing. Again, like, I don't feel anything about it anymore because of how much I learned from it and how much I realized how much better I am because of it. And I just hope that something in there spoke to somebody out there who might be going through the same things. So if you guys have any outstanding questions or anything like that, please comment them below, or just comment anything else you want. Let me know that it helped. Let me know if you have any more questions. I don't know. And I will catch you all in my next video. See you later. Bye.